Hello, my name is Ekaterina. I'm glad to see you on my channel. In this video today, I'm going to show you how to visually identify these pattern details. I already have a video on my channel where we studied pattern details, exactly what they're called and where they're located, but that's not enough. When you're building something according to instructions, or for example, I am Ekaterina. Today, learn to visually identify pattern details for self-checking when using ready-made instructions. So, following the instructions, did you make a mistake? Or maybe you're tracing ready-made pattern pieces? We'll learn to visually distinguish the pieces we need. Just as children are taught to identify squares, triangles, and circles, we'll learn to recognize these pieces by eye. Here are the main pieces before you, starting with the front bodice. We'll focus on the back and the sleeve. Since humans are naturally symmetrical beings, these pattern pieces are also symmetrical. Because they're symmetrical, there's no point in constructing the entire piece. It's enough to draft just half of the back section. This part here is its center, which serves as the line of symmetry. It's also enough to draft half of the front bodice. This is the center. And it is also the primary line of symmetry. The sleeve is drafted in full, but we must remember that we have a left and a right sleeve. Even though it also has a center line, it is not actually symmetrical. We'll set the sleeve aside for now and begin the construction process. Let's begin with the front bodice. So, as I mentioned before, this piece is perfectly symmetrical. Since this video is specifically designed for absolute beginners who are just starting out, I will go ahead and take the time to draw everything out very clearly for you. Because this tutorial is for those new to the craft, I am going to draw this entire piece in its full size so you can follow along easily. There we go. For right now, I am simply focusing on outlining all of the primary contours and shapes, and I am intentionally not doing anything else or adding any extra details at this particular stage of the process. Once you have successfully finished drafting your initial pattern, you have exactly one half of the total design. But when you begin the process of cutting your garment, if, for example, there is absolutely nothing along the center line, you will then produce a single complete piece of fabric. I'm just tracing it. Once you have drafted your pattern, you have half of it. When cutting your garment, if there is no closure along the center, fold your fabric in half and place the center line right on that fold. That is exactly and precisely where the fabric fold is situated right there, and you will find that the grain line runs perfectly and smoothly along the center. So when you are ready to carefully cut out your specific pattern piece from the fabric fold is, and the grain line runs along the center. And of course, when you cut out your piece, you need to remember to add seam allowances. I'll talk about seam allowances another time. And where the dart is, we do not cut it out. The primary objective of today's task is really just to take a very close look and gain a comprehensive understanding of exactly what all of these individual pieces look like in their current state. As I carefully begin to unfold it right now, you can see the intricate details emerging, and here is my first real opportunity to examine the specific layout and structure of everything we are working with today. Let me close the dart on one side for now. You will immediately see and understand exactly why the bust dart is so necessary, as it is a unique feature that is only ever found on the front bodice piece of the garment. Folding this dart on the front bodice shows you why the bust dart is essential for the fit. Why is this volume needed here? It's so that the sculpted bust can fit right here. And if our design includes a bust dart, it means there will be a very minimal number of folds right here in this specific area. The flat piece turns three-dimensional to fit the bust. A bust dart reduces the folds or tucks that form when a garment lacks one. Let's look. Starting here on the bodice front, and now I'll walk you through all the different lines we see on our piece. So we have the center. This is the neckline line, the one that fits along the base of the neck. Next, looking at the bodice front again. And now I'll walk you through all the lines we see on our pattern piece. So we have the center, here it is right here, the neckline line. This is the specific line that fits along the base of the neck. Next, we have this large wedge shape right here. The larger the size and the larger the bust, the notably bigger this wedge will eventually be. If, for example, the dart, this is the bust dart. The larger the garment size and the larger the bust, the bigger this wedge will naturally be. If, for example, we sew the dart closed, we will see clearly here that this is the shoulder line. Next, we have the armhole line and the side seam line. This is the waist dart because the human body, typically the figure widens at the bust, and then for those lucky individuals blessed with a beautiful waistline, it narrows back down at the waist. For example, right here I have a small scaled down copy of my very own bodice front pattern. Since I personally have a figure with a bit of a tummy, you can see that my waist dart is shifted over here, closer to the side seam. That is something that happens quite often in garment construction too. So, as we can see, that's the standard option. For us, this is the specific kind of design option where the waist dart is utilized. The standard approach we typically follow is when the waist dart is carefully constructed on the exact same vertical line as the bust line. This specific position is where it is usually placed for the best fit. As you can see right here, this is how it looks when aligned perfectly. Here it is, positioned exactly where it needs to be for this particular pattern. When examining the construction, or when we are drafting the bodice front, our outlines, regardless of your size or what you're making, the outlines will look something like this. And next to it, I will now place the back piece. Now, if we take a closer look, we can clearly see the specific differences here. For instance, you will notice that the center front is always a straight vertical line. Similarly, the center back is also constructed as a vertical line if our back piece is designed to have a central vertical line. As a reference, the fabric is folded in half. This means it will be cut in exactly the same way as the front. The fabric is folded in half and the center front is placed along the fold. Now, the front may have, for example, a very small dart intake. Well, bodies are different and there are different constructions. And on the back, we also see a dart. This is a bust dart and this is a shoulder dart. There are such variations. How do you avoid confusing the front with the back? The bust dart will always be directed toward the center of the chest, while the shoulder dart, to distinguish front from back with small darts, remember, bust darts point to the chest center, while shoulder darts point to the shoulder blades. Since shoulder blades sit higher than the bust, the dart position and purpose clarify the piece. Additionally, we also have another very distinguishing feature, which is the specific shoulder slope. When we draft a pattern, the shoulder slope on the front piece is always significantly greater than the shoulder slope on the back piece. For example, look, I'm drafting only down to the waistline here. If I close this, Here it is on the front piece. But if I take the back piece, okay, and here I close the dart. This is what the shoulder looks like. You need to know these nuances even before you start drafting or tracing anything. This is to avoid making fatal mistakes that can lead to, well, at the very least, ruined fabric and at worst, a loss of confidence in yourself. Here is the highest point on the front piece and here is the highest point on the back piece. Now look at the angle of deviation from the horizontal on the front piece and the angle of deviation from the horizontal on the back piece. The difference between the front and the back armholes. Compare front and back angles. This is the part of the front and back that faces the junction line between the torso and the arm. This is what we call the armhole. Here is one armhole and here is another. The front piece is always cut deeper than the back piece. There are flat cut constructions where both sides are almost identical, but right now we're looking at options with darts. Accordingly, this shoulder point, the point where the armhole line and the shoulder line meet on the front piece, is always lower than the point where the armhole line and the shoulder line meet on the back piece. If I lay it out like this, horizontally, you can see just how much of a difference there is. This shoulder point on the front is always lower than the point where the armhole and shoulder lines meet on the back. If I lay it out here, you can see just how much higher the shoulder is. No matter what you're making, what size you are, or your body shape, this point on the back is always higher. If you're in the middle of drafting and this point doesn't end up higher, then you've already committed a serious error somewhere. Remember this configuration. This point is always higher than this one. It might not be much higher, but it's still higher. It absolutely cannot be the other way around. On the back, regardless of size or shape, this point is always higher. If your draft doesn't show this, there's an error. Remember this. The back side seam must be higher than the front. It might be a small difference, but they cannot be identical in shape. You often see incorrect constructions that just add a bust dart. The back and front side seams match exactly. While shoulder darts exist, they are typically moved elsewhere during the sewing process. And then, as you can see, the front piece looks completely different from what you are seeing in this picture here, but still, whether you are drafting a design, modeling, or simply transferring a pattern from a magazine, you really need to know exactly where that bust dart is located. This is widely known as the most common, the most frequently used, and the most essential part of the entire garment construction process. The most commonly used option that we encounter in this specific pattern making technique is when the dart is shifted over to the side seam. What exactly does that look like in practice? Well, it looks just like this, so please take a very close look at the adjustment as it happens. Right now, I am carefully closing the bust dart in order to transfer the volume to its new position. There, as you can clearly see, the transformation is complete. Right now, it doesn't really matter to adjust it at this specific stage of the process. If you take a close look at the screen, this is the exact construction we have managed to get so far. Here it is, laid out clearly for you to see. As you can observe, absolutely nothing has changed here in this particular section. We are focusing on the overall size of the dart and the specific amount of volume it creates within the fabric, which remains consistent with our previous steps. The entire bust area of the garment also hasn't changed and remains exactly the same. The only thing that is different is that the position of this particular structural dart has changed. Let me go ahead and cut it out now, and then we will take a much closer look at it together. Regarding the topic of seam allowances, I'll definitely make a separate video about that later on. For now, let's not worry about it too much. Right now, we're going to focus on the different shapes the main pattern pieces can take. Look here. If I close this dart, this is exactly where it should be. This is where it should be. Here we have exactly the same volume. How can we check if it's truly the same or not? For example, let's carefully fold this construction just like this, and then we can place this entire construction right on top like this. As you can see, nothing has changed. It is still the same volume. It is the same dart. It occasionally happens that you might find it's just that now it's directed the other way. Here it is, exactly the same. Sometimes the front and back pieces consist of several parts, and these parts are most often cut along the dart lines so that we don't just have a stitched dart but some kind of design line. It's very convenient to transfer the dart into a yoke, a stitched dart, but some kind of design line. It's very convenient to transfer the dart into a yoke, and the yoke can be any kind you like. Let me show you. The simplest option is when you draw a line from the highest point of the bust, like this, and then they tell us now your front piece consists of. So, the dart is transferred into some kind of seam here, a seam is made here, and as a result, the dart is transferred into the yoke. Then they'll label it as the front piece. And you can see that the fold is right over here, and the fold is here. Or if a closure is intended, they'll mark this as the center, where there will be a placket, either as a separate piece or cut as one with the front. Here is an option. The yoke now simply consists, this is the yoke of the front piece and the fold is right here. If a closure is intended, they'll mark this as the center, and there will be a placket along the edge. So the front now consists of two separate parts, while the back is still just one piece for now. I'll show you how the back can look as well, very soon. The back piece is still just one single piece for now. I'll show you how the back can look as well. Very often, we make a center seam on the back, because the human figure has a natural curve at the waist, so that the garment fits the body perfectly. The center seam is. This is absolutely the most important part of the entire lesson. Right here, you can clearly see the vertical line. For the time being, it is only drawn lightly in pencil. However, it is quite possible that right here it is not actually a fold, but a structural seam instead. In that specific case, you definitely do not need to worry about placing it along the fold of the fabric anymore. If we take a close look at our back piece, you will notice that there is a distinct seam located right here. This specific vertical line is what we commonly refer to as the center seam of the entire garment. Sometimes it happens that because this is a center seam instead of a fold, this specific design helps save material. A dart, especially a well-placed shoulder dart, is an incredibly useful and versatile tool, particularly for individuals with rounded backs, and you can effectively use them to improve the overall silhouette. A straight or slightly curved shoulder dart is useful for rounded backs. For example, you can point it toward the neckline. It can be directed specifically toward the center, toward the exact middle of the neckline, perhaps a bit higher or even a bit lower. This doesn't change the final result at all. We just need to understand structurally that these lines can be a little different from each other, but the overall volume for the shoulder blade curvature remains exactly the same. Only the specific shape is different. Don't worry, this is still the back of the garment, and the essential dart for the shoulder blade volume is fully preserved, even if you don't see it right away. Don't worry, this is still the back, and the dart for the shoulder blade volume is definitely preserved within it. So if you see such a construction, you don't need to think, oh, what happened there? Where is it? It's still in place, it's just been integrated into the design, so it remains functional even if hidden. The dart is simply being redirected in a completely different direction now, but you will notice that the overall volume of the garment remains exactly the same as before. Absolutely nothing changes in terms of fit. It is the very same principle that I demonstrated earlier with the front piece. I carefully cut the fabric, and then I work to shape this small dart to achieve the desired silhouette. The shoulder remains the shoulder. It's simply that now the dart is directed in the other way. And these yokes are made using the exact same principle. For example, let me now draw not just a simple straight line, but a much more mysterious and complex one. The shoulder is unchanged, but the dart is redirected. Yokes follow this. I'll draw a curve through it. Dart. But when modeling, sometimes the lines don't go through the center, and then it gets more complicated. We cut it out. Closing the back seam while keeping dot fullness. The back looks like this with the seam here. Could this construction exist? Why not? It's possible. For the front, I'll quickly sketch it out. It would go like this. There are many different options for where to hide the dart. Seams. In this seam, the dart is hidden. But if I don't have this seam, it goes into the side. This is how my seam looks then. There are many options for where to hide the dart. In fact, The whole idea of modeling is based on this. But the main thing for us to understand is what are the main differences between the front and the back. On the front, the main differences are as follows. On the front, the bust dart is directed toward the center of the bust. On the back, the shoulder dart is directed toward the highest point of the shoulder blades. The front neckline is deeper, while the back neck drop is shaped more smoothly. The most important thing to remember is that side seams must stay symmetrical. The back armhole is cut smaller, the front armhole is shorter, and the front shoulder slope is always. You need to lower the other side accordingly. Therefore, it is important that this upper point on the back section remains consistently higher than the matching point located on the front of the piece. The back's upper point stays higher than the front. Sew the sleeve cap into these armholes, ensuring the sleeve has a marked center line, and it also indicates the direction of the grain line. And it also indicates the direction of the sleeve's grain line. There is the front edge, the elbow edge, and the bottom line. Each sleeve also has a parameter called the sleeve cap height. The sleeve cap height is this distance right here, and the greater the sleeve cap height, the narrower, more tailored, and with the least amount of creasing the sleeve will be. But it is also the most uncomfortable sleeve, so as you can see, it's always about finding a compromise. If we want a sleeve to be loose so that you can swing your arms around or do acrobatic exercises in it, then it either needs to be loose or we need to sew it from very fitted sleeves are less comfortable, so we compromise. For mobility, use loose or elastic fabrics. But a structured sleeve like this looks sharp while restricting your movement. You can't really wave your arms around freely or dance while wearing it. Since the specific shape of the armhole varies quite a bit, you can see here it is much more concave. Accordingly, the shape of the sleeve cap, which is the part that goes directly into the armhole, drops down much more sharply and is cut out significantly deeper. This specific part is then carefully sewn to the front bodice section. I'm writing this for the back bodice. The combined length of the armhole curve on the front bodice piece plus the length of the armhole curve on the back bodice piece should be equal to or slightly less than the total length of the sleeve cap curve. On such very disciplined laboratory rats, both armholes combined must fit within the sleeve cap. There's a lot more to talk about, but the main thing to understand is that if, for example, you take a ready-made pattern and you see that your pattern has dots preserved and the sleeves have a high sleeve cap, and you try to set the sleeve into the armhole and notice in this area the sleeve is larger. This is not a mistake, it's intentional. But if you're sewing something with a when we consider a drop sleeve, we are looking at something that is very, very relaxed in its fit. In this case, the sleeve cap is positioned much lower, and there is absolutely no ease to be found there. For instance, our front bodice looks just like this, quite relaxed, and you can see that the bust dart hasn't been preserved. Here is a perfect example of such a version. Accordingly, when you are working with this specific kind of version, I won't draw the back right now. It's not essential. I'll show you now for this option what it will look like. Now for the sleeve. When you are constructing a new garment, for example, when searching for a ready-made pattern to use, in your specific case, your finished armhole will look like this. It will be a much flatter surface, just a wider sleeve like this. The bottom will most likely be completely straight, and these will be your lines. In such constructions, well, you can't even tell right away which part of the sleeve goes to the front and which part goes to the back. That is exactly why professional tailors and pattern makers have long agreed that there should be notches on both the sleeve and the armhole to make it much easier to sew them together. At the very least, there should be one notch located on the front armhole and another notch on the part of the sleeve cap that goes to the front. In addition to this, we also have another sleeve option to look at. The set-in sleeve, which is a highly popular choice for sleeves. So what does our current construction look like right now? Look, we still have our specific knitting needle. Here, let's say, various different authors approach this process differently. They handle the shoulder seam in various ways. Okay, now I'll turn it to this side of the neck. I didn't think I'd need it higher up there. Oh, right, I almost forgot to mention. The highest point, that is, you should always have a notch on the sleeve that marks the highest point of the sleeve cap. And this highest point of the sleeve cap, when we sew in the sleeve, should match up with this point here where the shoulder meets. There are cases when it's shifted slightly to one side or the other, but in that case, there are some additional notches here. By default, this is the situation we have. The sleeve cap peak aligns with the shoulder. Here is another notch. We have it. I'm explaining, but I almost forgot to mention the most important thing. So, if we take a look at the situation right now, things are moving along more or less as we had expected, though they are not quite perfect in every way just yet. There is simply not enough length here to fully ease in quite properly. The sleeve. But that's not critical. This is my shoulder. Here it goes this way. Now, if you take a moment to look over in this direction, you should be able to see a very specific type of architectural construction, like this one right here, which serves as a perfect example of the design style we are discussing today and stands out quite prominently within its current surroundings. When the whole back piece and the garment sleeve form a single complete whole. Of course, it seems like it's incredibly simple to cut, but it uses a lot of fabric and it's not always convenient. So I will label this as the back. There. To start off right now, for example, I'll give you a rough demonstration. This is exactly how the outcome should look for all of us. The front piece, as it were, has more options. I'll mark in red that this is a modification for the front piece. And for the front piece, naturally, here it's straight like this, meaning on the back. But on the front piece, there's a slight drop here. So you do see these and constructions like this as well. So which way should you turn it towards yourself? Where to look for the entrance and exit? Look at the neckline here. The neckline on the back, or rather the back neck drop, is smaller, and on the front piece it's larger. There are some authors who do it like this. They raise this specific front piece and then carefully shift it over to this side. But that is not how I usually do it. These are also, let's say, little things and details. Right now, the main thing for us is to understand that we can have the pieces, the front and back with the sleeve, look like a single piece. One big piece like this. This is cut as one piece, a one-piece sleeve. It is quite easy for us to understand that. I'll write here that this is the front piece of the sleeve. We can understand that the shape of the armhole and the shape of the sleeve change. That is to say, the more relaxed the construction, the more the shoulder is dropped, and the greater the overall freedom of movement becomes. Here, in the front and back pieces, when we completely eliminate the use of darts, the sleeves must be adjusted accordingly to match. Its sleeve cap will naturally become significantly smaller. We see a sleeve like this as if someone grabbed it by the top and stretched it out to the sides. Stretched it out like this. It became smaller. This distance right here has noticeably decreased, but over here it has significantly increased. We can also clearly see and understand that even in cases where the bust dart is preserved, both the front and back pieces can consist of several distinct and separate parts. For example, there can be structural yokes pneumopause, and accordingly the front and back pieces. And this here is the back yoke. We also have a wide variety of different options where the dart is shifted or moved in several different directions, but its original position is carefully preserved. And from the center, now let's go over once again the primary differences between the front and the back pattern pieces. On the front piece, the bust dart, regardless of its actual width, is always directed precisely toward the center of the bust area. On the back piece, the shoulder dart is directed toward the most prominent part of the shoulder blade. The neckline on the front piece is cut deeper, while on the back piece, the back neck drop is more gradual. The waist darts on the front and back pieces can be positioned, for example, like this along this axis. They can be shifted closer to the side seam, and there can be several of them. It depends on how curvy the person is. The side seam lines are always symmetrical. The center lines are verticals on the front piece. Right here is always the center line, and it is also a vertical. On the back piece, a princess seam may appear here. This is to remove excess fabric at the curve of the back. And now, the most important thing, and this is the most common mistake people make. When you are shaping the armholes of your garment, you really need to keep in mind that the armhole on the back piece is a much smoother line, while the armhole on the front piece is more scooped out and more pronounced. And the slope of the shoulder on the front is greater than the slope of the shoulder on the back. Accordingly, this highest point here on the back will always be higher than this point right here. And with that, we'll wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to my channel, give it a like, and leave a comment. It's very important to me. And of course, please share this video on social media. It's quite possible that among your friends and acquaintances, there are people who want to learn how to sew but don't know where to start. Right now, there is an opportunity to do so, little by little. I'm releasing new lessons for absolute beginners, beginning right at the very basics. All the lessons are being collected into one playlist, into a single collection. Please share it. Maybe not now, maybe later. You can open this link and find a wonderful collection of sewing lessons for beginners there. And with that, I'll say goodbye to you. All the best to everyone and good luck. Goodbye.